So what's going on? How's the trading been today?
Well, I can start off with mine real quick. So Catalyst was earnings, and the setup was a day two. Was looking for a first move up. Something I've really struggled with lately is following through on my plans. And so last Friday I was talking with Kyle Balance, and I just said I would like to just some a little bit of accountability until I get a groove going. And so we're kind of working together just so I can follow through on my trades. And today it didn't work out, and I'll go over that. But something I'm really happy is that I followed through on my plans today. My plan was to short and their first move up into 320, and start. I think I was going to be dead wrong over 325, and I was. I'm down about 16% of a stop, which is okay with me. But we had this first move up, and I thought we'd get kind of a rollover like a typical day two. But something that we saw today with a lot of these day twos is just really strong moves up. I mean, we had DE, ROST, a few of these other day twos that we really haven't seen that type of strength in day twos lately.
Yeah.
And we just haven't. And this is, I mean, look at this day two move. This is a really strong day two move. And if we pull up ROST too, I mean, that's another really strong. Those are just the two that I was looking at. And it didn't work out, but I think the setup is still valid for possible day three. But we just had a real strong, I mean, this was an ATR move in what, 30 minutes on this. And something that else that I think I did really well was that I didn't sit and try to sit and attack this again. I did have a short scalp up here because I thought with the Qs and the market rolling over, but it didn't even roll over when the market was. So that's something that I was a little bit more cognizant of. And then we just started buying into here. And so I just said, forget about it. I'll watch it tomorrow for a possible day three setup, but that was all that I took today. So
I thought that was like we were talking about it with previously because I shorted into that first pop too and was taken back with the strength. The strength is really surprising, like really, really surprising. So, it was one of those things where, you try and use that as information of what can happen. And really, like, if we go a little more granular, like what should happen on that trade when you get that first move up, what should happen?
you should see a pretty quick fail.
I even think that the first move up lower, like the one almost into 320, right? Wasn't that
Yeah.
like kind of our first level on those?
Yeah, 320 was.
Yeah. So I was kind of thinking like, man, couldn't that be like it a little bit?
Yeah.
And it started the rollover, didn't it? I mean,
Yeah, it did. And it even lost VWAP, but then this move over VWAP was just, it was a real strong move. And it
it
just
was
can,
so different, wasn't it?
yeah, it was very, very different.
And I bet you if you look at the charts of that and then the GME, I sort of remember GME trading a little more of a consolidation versus a break, but like
hmm
these are things that you want to learn from, I think, because they're, like as soon as you see that move, it's sort of a, oh boy, hands off on that sort of
Yeah,
thing, right? Because like
absolutely.
we have our levels, but it's that sort of price action that you really can learn a lot from, I think.
hmm
Or it can give you a lot of information about the potential of the trade. So,
Do you see an opportunity, like where would you have possibly flipped long on this? Where would
that's where
you?
I asked the Fuse guys to they had the tape on it. And
hmm
so I kind of want to watch the tape because I took the short off. Like
Yeah.
that's it, right? Like I got blown out of my short and that's fine. That happens. But I'm kind of really intrigued to see the tape and figure out like, hey, on this tape, like, is there a spot to get long? Because
hmm
maybe you're seeing buying above 322. Well, that's a really uncomfortable spot, right? But
hmm
that's about the only consolidation that you have.
Yeah.
And I guess it's sort of if you're watching it, you could, kind of make that change and make that trade. But I really do want to watch the tape because I don't, I'm with you. I don't necessarily see something that I'm like, oh man, that's exactly what I needed to see in order to get long. Um,
Yeah.
so it's
True.
tough.
For
That's what
sure.
I was talking to Caleb about too. As I said, obviously in hindsight, you can maybe try to get into that 322 kind of consolidation period, risking that 320 area.
Because look, it
But if,
holds above the resistance area from the prior day, like cleanly at that
yep.
322, right? Like, so
But I think that's where the tape ultimately is going to be the deciding factor on really seeing where, because obviously that's just hindsight, but updating the narrative with it, like you had the first move into the levels that we were looking at. you had the failure, you had it go back below open price, VWAP, everything that you were looking for a rollover, but buyers automatically stepped up. And Jeff, like you mentioned, buyers ultimately just went from 316.50 up to 324. So I think at that point, that's where the narrative is updated. And maybe the only thing that I'm seeing is maybe above the 322 area, risking down to 320. But that's where the tape, I think, is going to have to come in and really see what we can find for actual kind of spots, in my opinion.
And look, maybe it's not even there's a spot in this one, but even if you're better about like, okay, instead of losing, Tori, you said you're down 16% of a stop, 1/6.
Yeah.
Yeah, so even if there's a way to cut it from 16% down to 10%, well, you saved yourself 6% of it, like by recognizing that sort of strength, right? It's not always about being able to flip it and be like, oh, this is a great long, but it is about, kind of learning from this experience, because it's not like it just didn't work. That's the part that's so unique about this trade, is it did exactly what it was supposed to do. And then that trade just changed. And for me personally, these are the most damaging ones, because sometimes I don't change the narrative, right? I get the short off at 320, and then all of a sudden it's like 323. And I'm like, yeah, but it's probably a better short. But like over time, if you can do a better job of, or I need to do a better job of making sure I'm updating the narrative to respect what's actually happening and the buying pressure and the way that the tape's trading and everything. And if I'm doing all that stuff, then I'm putting myself in a position to win. Right. And it may not come in a long, but it may come by just recognizing it and being out faster. Like it's a totally valid thing to just recognize it and be out faster.
I think one thing that I was looking at, just giving my feedback as well, just based off kind of like evaluating or reviewing how I traded it personally. I thought for me, like I saw improvements, because for me, like what I've seen over the past like couple of weeks now is that, especially on these first moves up, I look to see like, okay, like sometimes I'm getting in too quick. And so for me, I was really trying to fight for that price today. Like we did have that at 931. We had that move up to like 319.59. And I saw it kept on going down and down. And I was looking, I was like, shoot, like, do I get into it? Do I get into it? And I was like, no, I'm gonna keep on waiting. I'm gonna fight for that price. That 320 level was where I was originally looking at to get short. So I did see the improvement for me being able to withstand, I guess you can say, that FOMO kind of thought process of, okay, maybe I missed my fill by 40 cents. Like, do I try to get in like a little sooner? How do I go? But I did end up waiting. I fought for that price. I got in at 320. I think overall, one thing what we were looking at is that between like the day twos, yes, DE did show that it had the potential to roll over. We had the break of VWAP, whereas Ross never even broke VWAP. It did have a pullback, but it sustained a move above VWAP and held the whole entire time. Whereas DE was showing that weakness characteristic of it being able to actually break VWAP as well. I think for me, so overall, like I was only risking 10% of a stop on this. I ended up losing only about 3% of a stop. I was risking up to that 325 level, but I think once we saw that we ended up breaking VWAP, we made a new low, but we were reclaiming. Once we broke through VWAP, I ended up hitting out right when we created that new high. I ended up getting filled right around the 322 area at 942. So I think for me, like I did minimize that risk. So I saw improvement for there, but instead of actually letting the full stop go like against me and the amount of risk, I saw the potential that, okay, I realized that this could have been an uptrend day. So I think for me, I only losing 3% on it. Like I'm happy with that. But I think overall is that once we ended up breaking VWAP there at 940, I think could have just said, okay, this could be basically that trend and actually hit out for a profit instead of trying to take that 3% loss on it. Realizing that we weren't basically able, I think if you look at it, 317.50 right around there, that was technically the pre-market high. So the way that it looked back, you only had a pullback basically about $1 below that, and then ultimately just had a full trend for the day. So I think for me, one thing, and that's what we talked about with Jeff with the tape, is going back to that. I think that right around in between like that 337 to 341, kind of really dive into that part of the tape itself, because that was really showing like where the actual characteristics of the day two were going to play out, but ultimately did not. So that's one of the key places I'm going to be looking at for the tape, is at 937 to 941 area. But I think overall is looking back at it next is like, For me, I was saying if this thing's holding above 324, that was where my thought process was. I was wrong with the trade. So I think for the improvement, once we actually did break that 324 level, I'm not too sure how, because like Jonathan said, maybe I guess the risk that what you could have said is that you look for a pullback from maybe like the 324 holding, like for me, when you get to first move up into like that 325 area, as you can see, you're holding 324 and you can risk to the prior high of the day of that 320, 321.84, which was the prior high at 941 once we actually broke. So maybe get a pullback holding above 324, risking down to 322 basically for that high. So I think that's kind of like the way that I'm kind of reviewing it, is looking for basically that flip of bias, basically looking to see how to improve on that.
Yeah, and that's for both you guys. I think you both get 8 out of 10s, 9 out of 10s on this, because this is an example of a trade that gave you what you wanted and then it didn't work. And neither of you are down more than 25% of the stop.
Correct.
Neither of you are even down 20% of a daily stop. And these can be the trickiest trades because they give you everything you're looking for. And yet they still don't work. And, you know, or they do work and then they don't work. And that's a really, really challenging thing to have happen in trading, but it does happen a lot. How you respond in that situation really says a lot about where the direction you're going as a trader.
Hey, go ahead and click our subscribe button so you don't miss any of the videos that we're producing for you in the trading community. And please take the time to add your feedback in the comments section for what videos you'd like for us to produce next and what you found helpful from this video. From all of us at SMB, train and trade well.